for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so starting out, first item on our agenda is an approval of the agenda. I will take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
Second.
I have a motion by Leah, second by Cordis. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, we will move on to first topic for the evening and the superintendent update. Mr. Hogan.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, and this wonderful audience tonight. Tickled to see you all here. I have two quick items for superintendent comments. The first one is to recognize someone who's been really special to me and for many of us, to recognize Ben Januszka in his retirement and congratulate him. Normally when you do something like this, the person is actually there, but Ben doesn't like these sort of things, he said, so he's happy to have us talk about him, but he won't be here. So, but as fun as that is, I gotta say, Ben has been a very important person to me personally and to the school district. For 5 years running now, Ben's school, Farmington Elementary School, has been a reward school, which is about the highest honor a school district in this state is given. And they have received that award every year that they have given that award. And that award is given to Title I schools, schools that have significant number of would be typically performing students, students of color, students who have English as a second language, students who grow up and live in poverty. So it really is quite an honor, and I think it's credit to Ben, his leadership in the school. Ben has also been my history. Ben has been here for over 20 years. He has been at FES since I believe 2007. And so, anytime I had a question about what the history was of this, how long has this been going on, and the things I need to know, it was Ben who I could turn to for that. Because he didn't only have the history, but Ben was always very calm and thoughtful, and there's a nice space to kind of get calm and thoughtful yourself by sitting with him for a little while, and he was quite a good strategist as well, so I'd always talk through things with him. Ben was always willing to stand up for his staff and give them room to be creative and to really do the things that they need to do to help all students succeed. I appreciated that in him, and it's something, of course, we're trying to emulate as a district as the way we move ahead with all of our improvements. But finally, again, Ben had a real heart for struggling and disadvantaged students, and it came out, in his work and every day. And so I'm gonna miss him. He will be he officially retires as of January 2nd. Of course, that means he will be done here, really at the end of next week when we all leave for break. So get a chance, congratulate him yourself, and maybe some of you might have some things to say at board remarks as well, but I wanted the chance to say that. So. My second item is about the school board's move to the city council chambers. Something we've been working, very hard on. For some of you who maybe didn't follow all of that, as our equipment has gotten older here and gotten less able to communicate with the world, something that we value greatly here, it was clear that we were going to have a very significant update to this building. We actually went about a month with hardly any kind of service at all, and they patched it together and got us to go this long. We've been working for months with the city on a partnership. The idea that they have city council chambers, that they have them very up to date, that they have a nice funding stream to keep it up to date, and that there's no reason for us to both spend, as a community, to spend that money twice. And so we've been busy training, getting used to their system, and doing the little bit of things we had to do to connect to their system. And so starting with our next board meeting, our organizational board meeting in January, don't come here. We will be at the city council chambers. So I really look forward to that, and
you. Tonight is our first meeting with our new student school board members. So our next item on our agenda is the student school board update, and we'll start with Miss Edwards as the veteran, and then move down the row. And we may or may not have all three at all meetings, but it's great to have their presence at the table and give us different perspectives. So Miss Edwards.
Yeah, I just want to welcome Cara and Amanda. I'm excited to have them with me here, and I look forward to hearing what they have to say for the next year and then year after that when I'm gone. So I think she prepared something. I'm not sure about Samantha.
So one big initiative that started today was brought to us by a student, which is collecting books to send to the children in Africa. And we'll be running this starting today through February, and then on the last day in February that we'll be collecting, we'll be going around the neighborhoods in Farmington to do trick-or-treating, kind of like we did for the canned goods, and asking for any other book collections that we can, and then we'll be sending them all to Africa.
And then I'm pretty sure this has been said before, but just a good reminder, this Saturday is the wrapping for Toys for Town. 9 o'clock at the high school. Anyone can come help out, wrap some toys. It goes for a really good cause. And then also, just with our winter sports are up into full swing, just a shout out to the boys hockey team. Beat their really big rivals, Lakeville North, the defending state champions the other night, so that's pretty cool. And the wrestling team that's been climbing up the ranks and is beating some high seeds to gain a third in the state rank for right now, so that's really cool.
Awesome.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So the book drive, is that children's books or books for all ages, or do you have any parameters on what you're trying to collect?
Just any books that can be donated.
Even textbooks.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Good to know.
All right. Moving on, we have public comment, and at this time I don't have any items up for public comment, so we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine business items that can be acted upon in a single motion. If any board member wishes to discuss an item, they may request that it be pulled from the consent agenda and it will be acted upon separately. Does anyone have an item they wish to discuss? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
Make a motion to approve the above consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Lee, a second by Sasser. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, we will move on to reports and communications. And our first item is facility use fees and procedures, and Superintendent Haugen.
All right, thanks again, Madam Chair. I'll try to be as brief as I can, but you'll want to sit back because this will take a little bit. So, because especially for those who maybe haven't been following, I want to do a little history so people know why we are where we are and how this all came about and how it's happened. About 2 budget cycles ago, Community Education brought a proposal to increase fees. Fees hadn't been increased in, I remember, I think it was 6 years at that point, at least 6 years at that point, and so they came with kind of that natural increase. But it was, except for maybe some tweaks, it was pretty much the same system that had been put in place then 6 or 8 years earlier. The board had a long conversation about it, and in the end, wanted to take a deeper look at the whole fee schedule, the way we interact with our community when it comes to, this is for facilities, and for whether it's our outdoor facilities or indoor facilities, or really renting them out to the community for after school. And so we took that back. It was part of budget season, didn't put a lot of time into it until the end of, we had a budget. And then that summer, and I hadn't even really remembered this till just recently, but one of the first things that happened is I sat down with all the users. We invited all the users and had this really great meeting. Maybe 30 of them came and just had an open dialogue about what it was like to use, our facilities and to interface with us, and what kind of service did we provide, and how would the fees affect them, and they seem enough or too much, or things like that. We had some great conversations. I'll just say that around that time, though, we started to have changes in the leadership who take care of this kind of thing. We had a new activities director, and there was a new high school principal, and actually a new finance director. So we really had a turnover of all the people who actually deal with those things. At the same time, some of you who follow this know that that everything to do with our facilities and facilities use, most everything moved from community ed, who's scheduled started coming up with plans and doing some planning, providing that information both formally and informally to the user groups, and a lot of back and forth on things we needed to do with our facilities to really improve the way that our facilities are used by our community and others. And so there are some things there were some basic things that ended up being the charge of what needed to change, what was the charge for those who were part of that initial group. And the first thing we wanted to do was simplify the fee structure and classifications. And so there were at that time, and well, actually currently, there's 5 different classifications for how much you have to pay and when it comes to using our facilities. There also were all kinds of added costs and fees depending on the things that you wanted or were going to use or what we're going to charge you for. We heard a lot right away from people that, even if the costs were okay, they felt like they're always being nickel and dime because there were so many extra little fees and extra things that came along with it. So then we knew that we wanted to streamline the process for staff. It's very time consuming to figure all those different things out, and it can be costly for you. How about if we had a system where we could just have a computer do it, where people can just sign up and the computer could actually just give you a bill instead of having to have a human sit down and figure out what you're paying as opposed to what someone else might be paying. And which means that it would be user friendly. We said we should keep the bottom line approximately the same, which was a change. When we all started this, the idea was to raise more fees, to have more fees available for upkeep and sort of thing, and things like that. But decided to start out with a bottom line approximately the same, and again, to be transparent, have a system. So what would keep happening is one group might feel we're paying a certain thing, another group might be paying something different. And you really had to compare why that was. It wasn't always very transparent. And so over this, we also, and so where did we land? Okay, where did we land? So in the end, administratively and ultimately then, there was a committee put together with a couple board members, Laura and Steve, and then some members from our large user groups. But ultimately, it was really administrators, especially Jane and Bill, sitting down with Steve and Laura and working through all that we had learned over the whole year to try to get together on a proposal for us and our community. And so what I have for you tonight collapses the 5 down to 3 classifications. It removes most of those add-on charges. But we also provided 3 different options and a little table that I'll show you in a minute of who are kind of the winners and losers when it comes to this. Because ultimately, when you totally change something, well, so one of the things as well that wasn't written in here, but when we started this, what you think of as community users, people from our community who provide services to our community would pay about 75% of the overall fees that we collect as an organization. And users from out of town or for-profit groups were only paying about 25%. And there is this belief that we should change that would be more even. Maybe for us as Group B and Group C now would pay on average about the same. And so we have all these things that came together. And ultimately, though, when the group that worked so hard, put it all so I'll just have to, I'll look over at Jane and say, Jane then went to work and put a tremendous amount of work in making all the numbers work. Now having it so that she could model and see what happens with every change and every adjustment, so that we are pretty certain, it's still an estimate because you change from one system to another, and sometimes there are things that don't totally foot from one system to a new system. So we're pretty certain that this is how things would have turned out if we had the current system in place. And so with that, I'm here tonight to kind of give you the whole package of what we have right now. And I want to start because there is these kind of natural progression. First, there's the practices and procedures, which then flow to who gets charged what. It's adding the fees to every space here, and then it's figuring out what that means for different groups. So it's kind of this three-step progression. And if that's not clear, I'll just start again where I think this all starts. And this is community use of District 192 school facilities and equipment, practices and procedures. And so this is the first thing that we would bring to you. We would bring to you, well, the whole package for approval, but this is then what everything else flows from. And I wanted to spend a little time with this. When I'm done, we'll turn this over because we have both Laura and Steve who are a big part of this, and of course Jane can answer all kinds of stuff about it if you have questions. But I wanted to first start with the philosophy. The School Board of District 192 recognizes that its buildings and grounds are important community resources that play a vital role in the life of district residents and organizations. Accordingly, the school board encourages and welcomes responsible community organizations, associations, and individuals to use district facilities for appropriate civic, cultural, welfare, or recreational activities, and that do not interfere with or hinder the operations and interests of the school district. And so with that, I'll just kind of skim through some of the things at the table in this policies and procedures manual. Definitions, I'll let you look through that if you like. So the first thing this has of substance is a master calendar. There were some changes to that. So in the end, how it works, then the master calendar is all the school district needs, principals and buildings get put in first. And then all the open dates are available for our community. And there are dates in here for when that happens, but there's also what happens if conflict arises. Because one of the things that could certainly happen is we may have some change that requires that a school district priority activity has to happen in a building or a certain space at a time when a community now has reserved it. For one reason or another. Maybe there was a cancellation because of weather or because of something happened to the power in the building or something. There comes a time when a school district activity might have to trump an activity where we already have a contract out for a community organization. We don't want that to happen, but some of those things are. And so I love the little language that was that we came to. Resolving scheduling conflicts between district and community events after July 15th. So number 3, if a school or administration requests a change or addition to the master calendar conflicts with a previously scheduled community event, the community event will have a preferred but not absolute right to the scheduled time. And so to me that means administratively that we do everything we can to not have that happen. And if we can pick a different date or be flexible, find a different way, it's only if we turned over every rock. We still need that space and need to supplant a community. We can do that, but it would really be services directly to our youth. They may be our own city. It may be nonprofits in our community or clubs. Again, things that are primarily serving people in this community and the youth in this community. So they have a much lower fee table than Class C, which is really all other groups, non-community based and for-profit groups. And again, the idea was to try to collect more money in Class C to actually raise their rates, which hadn't been raised in nearly a decade, to kind of make up for not actually lowering, or at least not increasing and sometimes lowering things for Class B. Okay, maybe enough there. But I will go to item C. Priority of use shall not be interpreted to mean that any classification has exclusive right to use district facilities. The Activities Department is directed by the school board to manage district facilities in a manner that provides reasonable access to all users. So Class A can't use all the space, Class B can, and Class C. Actually, the funding doesn't work if we don't have plenty of space for Class B, C, and welcome out of district and for-profit groups to our building. That's part of how the funding works, how we're able to keep costs at a minimum. Because as you'll see, those costs are still not exorbitant costs for what they're getting. We'll get to that in a little bit. You can, again, read through some of those additional things or some other important information there, just hitting the highlights. Conditions of use. Yes, we want people to conduct themselves, how we want people to conduct themselves, who are permit holders, who are those who are using the facilities. Take a look at that. Permitted times of use. Read through that. I don't know if there's anything too earth-shattering there. We can deny use for a whole lot of reasons. Usually if someone's been using our facilities inappropriately or the system inappropriately. Of course, we do need some procedures for emergency closing facilities and what that looks like. A little bit about supervision. District building supervisors and our district custodians will supervise all community events. The cost of labor provided outside normal operating hours for services beyond the scope of normal duties or for large groups will be charged to the user. Risk management. User groups shall provide a certificate of liability. Each year, the school board will set all access and equipment fees. Will approve a facility use fee table. That's something I will bring to show you next. Again, I think there's just more information pertinent to users, like cancellation fees. There's kind of a schedule for what happens if you have to cancel something that you had scheduled and the cost associated with it, depending on when we learn. There are ways that you can share facilities with some other group that speaks to that. And all the different, food service, how does that work? Our performance facilities, where you maybe need technicians, how does that work? Lifeguards, police officer if it's required, all those things are handled. I really am very impressed at the end with how our policy. I know a lot of this was policy that was worked out a long time ago and has just been changed and updated. But when you really spend time with it, people have really spent a lot of time trying to think of everything.
Superintendent, just for clarification, this isn't going to be policy, but it will be a procedural document, correct?
Thank you. Yes, that's right. So it's something that I guess I would envision when we bring the fees every year, we probably bring any updates to this to the board as well. Anytime something didn't work, sometimes you never thought of everything, something didn't work, we could bring that to the board to update you on the changes we plan to make. The policy is MSBA policy wanted to do that, and now we'll take just a few minutes to actually show the tables and the different fees and the different options. And I know there's a lot of small print here, but I don't believe that the small numbers in each thing are all that important. It's kind of the bottom line and what this means for each group at each amount. And so what really has happened is, I'll just say Jane put particularly a lot of time in this, taking a look at what we've charged in the past, what we're charging now, where we collapse things. We used to have different costs for maybe the media centers in different buildings or different gyms in different buildings. Really put together a table that could be used, as kind of a district table where all in one place you can see the costs. And so you can see there's, for Class B, there's gyms and wrestling room and aerobic center, recital hall, commons, kitchen, classrooms, computer lab, pool, track, turf field, little theater, all those kind of things are on here if you can't read them. And then a set a cost to each of those, kind of in line more or less with what people would have paid in the past. The caveat again to that is now we've collapsed from 5 to 3. So some people will pay less because they would maybe have sort of moved down, or some people may have moved up, down to B, a B, or up to C from their other classifications. And so you'll see that. And so there's option A, which is option B in the middle, tried to bring everything to break even. So we forecast that we would make approximately the same dollars as we have been making. More closely said, if this had been in place a year ago for a year, it would have been cost neutral. Moving ahead, people will make different decisions. I just want to be really upfront about that. Now that there's new procedures and new costs and new ways of charging for these, people will probably make different decisions, but it shouldn't be wildly different.
Superintendent Hogan, can I interrupt? I'm sorry, just for clarification because it's not listed. So this is dollars per hour. So some of these are like $6 an hour, some of them are 35 cents per hour. It's per hour? Is that what the fee table is in reference to?
Generally per hour. How about like the fields, outdoor fields? Is that per hour?
Okay, so like the outdoor fields, we're charging potentially 50 cents per hour. Okay, I just wanted clarification because.
Thanks. Yeah, that's important to point out. So these are the fees charged per hour. In the end, I can go back and forth. I really want to get to the bottom number so that people know what the end is, and then we can go back and talk about any other things specifically. So this is for Class C. Again, folks who are using this for-profit group or out of our community group. And you can see where the gyms are here, $27 or $17. Wrestling room is $20 per hour for option A. It's in Class B, it's $6 and $10. So it's really a fairly significant difference if you're a for-profit or out of community group. So the bottom line is B is our more or less cost neutral option. A is one where we forecast that we would actually, I didn't want to say lose money, but we would bring in less revenue than we have been. And C is one we would bring in slightly more revenue. You can look through there and see some of the reasons why. It's a variety of things. We just charge a little bit more for. Gym 1 in Class C is $27 in option A, $28 in option B, $29 in option C. No real magic here, just spending more for each option to bring in more revenue. So, so keep that in mind. Again, 3 options. I want to show you then finally the results of all of these. And so here, we have all these clubs that we work with that use our space. And we have a list of 97 of them. And along in this line K here, it shows the 5 clubs are Class C, and this is the amount of money extra they would pay if this had been in place, this system, instead of the one they were under when they are out. So you can see the increases for the year. This is the increase they would pay for the year. Is not, not that great, but it can be substantial. If you see, as soon as we get to a couple B groups, they would have paid a little bit less. There actually is a C here that would have paid less. Next C would pay more. Again, it really depends on the decisions that they made, the things that they were using, whether their costs went up or down. But in general, I'll just say C's are almost always paying more, and D's are almost always paying less, but that's not universally true. See, a lot of red again means that they're paying less, but depending on whether you went with A, B, or C, you see some might pay less or could pay more. There's almost too much to go through here, except that, again, comes down to the same bottom line. Some B's even pay substantially less. And, some C's could pay fairly substantially more. But again, that's without them making decisions. Now they would know up front how much it would cost them, and they would make maybe different decisions. Sometimes people would have in the past make a decision to basically have maybe a number of fields or number of spaces because it maybe depended on their participation instead of by space or something like that. So now it's by space, it's clear what you're going to be paying, and maybe they would make a different decision to not use as many spaces. There's just all kinds of things that happen, but I don't know if we come with a recommendation, except we did do this in mind that we would be cost neutral. So we kind of came in mind with doing the middle option is really what we've always had in our mind. To go with more might be something where if we wanted to designate more money to field upkeep or something like that, maybe would be a reason to designate more. I do want to point out that if we did choose like option C, the third option, still many of the B groups would still pay a little less than they have in previous years. Just would be fewer of them that would be paying less. So, anything else? What did I miss? I know that's a lot of stuff.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'll just offer some comments since I was on the committee. Since I was on the committee, I can offer some comments. First of all, I just want to point out that one of the reasons that we would lower the cost for the B groups, which are the local nonprofits and local youth groups serving youth, is because many of those groups are making contributions to our facilities. They're making improvements, they're fixing things, they're building new, structures or things. And so, that was part of it. I think if you remember when Bill Cheetah came up, he kind of talked about that. One of the reasons, that the way they were looking at reducing that was because of that contribution. So I just want to make that clear as to why we were kind of driving towards reducing the cost for B, because they're already giving a lot back, and this allows them to have more money to give back, basically.
Sorry, I thought you were done.
What?
I thought you were done.
Oh, and so, we've spent quite a bit of time. Steve and I have been on these spreadsheets and things like that, and been able to do quite a bit of analysis prior to even the board posting of these things. And in looking at these, my personal opinion is that B is probably the best option. A, which is the break even. And that's not to say that we will necessarily break even this year at all. Like say we're using last year's usage and people will make different decisions. Option A doesn't provide a ton of differentiation between the two groups. There really isn't a lot of outliers. It's maybe a little bit safer But I think what we want to do is, like I say, provide that differentiation between the B and the C, and I think that the break even gets us a little bit closer to that. The thing with the option C, which is to bring in extra money to the district, we risk losing some of our users in that because the increases are rather substantial for certain user groups. So I think that one has a little bit higher risk factor with it. What? Option C. Because some of the groups are increasing from where they were last year, which isn't shown on here, quite substantially by like thousands of dollars. And I think that would be enough for them to make a decision to at least look elsewhere and see if they can get a better deal somewhere else. So I'm a little reluctant on option C. I could, like say, I think the break even is the best one as far as looking at it from a financial view, being involved in clubs before, and working with their finances and things like that. I kind of went through the list and said, would I consider the effort of going to find a new place or not, and see, and looked at that list, and I think the break-even one offered, there were some people that may still look, but you know, we may also get other people in. And I think another thing that was kind of interesting is that I thought people were mostly making the decision, especially when you had groups outside of our community, especially athletics groups using our facilities. I thought that was always a financial decision, but what I found out is it's really we need space and we don't care what it costs to get it decision. When they're coming to us, they're desperate, and so they probably are willing to pay that additional fee. So that's my comments.
So, Madam Chair, so that was my question, and now we've got Board Member Beam's opinion. I was going to ask what your opinion was about the options since you sat on the committee.
Well, I agree with what Laura was saying on that. I mean, we spent a lot of time with Jane as well. And some of it's a little misleading because some of it is there's indoor space and there's outdoor space, so it's not as bad as the increase is on the sheet. I know you don't know who the players are, but we do, but there could be an increase, say, of $400, but that's because it's gym space and outdoor fee mixed together. So overall, it's very fair. One thing I think we need to take note on is the maintenance for the outdoor facilities. We really got to look in how we're going to maintain them, because I think that's a big issue moving forward that we need to decide with facilities of how we're going to handle that, especially with the new sprinkler systems. And also to Board Member Beam's point, Youth Lacrosse voted last night. They're donating $25,000 worth of turf to this city for the ice rink to put turf down for March and April, which the school district will be able to use for a lot cheaper than sports teams going to Rosemont Dome and stuff like that. But with that being said, I think we really need to do a better partnership with our youth programs right now, because they're looking, softball is utilizing Empire. They're putting a lot of money in those fields. I think we need to go out to our youth groups more and start saying, hey, what can you do to help us out here financially on that? Because a lot of them are willing to put some money and support into it, because the fee structure is great. They support it. They supported it last year. It's more the maintenance part of it right now. And again, I think the group that put this together, Jane, I know you spent a lot of time on it. It was great information. And I agree that the medium or the B group actually makes out very well overall from the school district standpoint on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, a couple of quick questions. In terms of how the facility fee structure moved from, not fee structure, the user groups moved from 5 to 3, can we highlight a little bit of what some of those changes were?
I can tell you one quick one. We used to, for outdoor facilities, it was per participant. So you paid X amount per child. So if you had 600 kids, say baseball does, times $8 is, you know, that math was what you'd pay. Now you would pay for the field use on that. Gym space, what you would do is we looked at the gym spaces. Instead of saying, okay, this gym floor is better than that, let's maintain them and say they're equal playing fields, and let's set the rate the same across the board. So a couple of the indoor space, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jane changed by like $2 an hour, which if you think about, it's pretty significant, and it decreased $2 an hour to correct that. So I mean, that's where you kind of see the impact of it.
That's not this specific question. I was asking in terms of how we used to have 5 designations for user groups, and now we have 3. My question was if there was any details of what moved to each of the 3 groups versus the 5.
How many user
in
groups?
terms of, because we had the three, not you, that's not the right term, it's not the user group. The class,
Classes.
thank you, Jane. The class, we had 5 classes to 3, I used the wrong term.
How many user groups changed classes?
Well, they all did, because we had 5 and now we're
Yeah.
down to 3. But, you know, because you can't really line up the 3 classes to the 5 classes.
Okay.
It's not like we moved them over. And we talked a lot about, I mean, as we started to look at the numbers and things like that, we're like, you know, this group should really be in this, and we changed the definition a bit so that it made more sense that these kind of groups were similar, but maybe serving a different segment of the community, but basically out for the same purpose. And so we did a lot of alignment in our definitions too, to make sure that we were getting the groups that we wanted, you know, the definitions that made the most sense or were the most, you had the same kind of homogeneous activities, I'll say, in the right groups. So that kind of went, so it's really to say, you know, because the thing is, you change the rates and you change the definitions. So to take the 5 and put it into the 3, pretty much every single group changed.
Yeah.
Thank you, that helps. And one more question as well. First of all, I want to thank the committee for all the hard work. Did we look at the neighboring communities' facility structures and I'm not just the facility fees in comparison? Do we compare to our neighboring districts or neighboring?
I think we
Is that looked at?
compared some of the practices and things like that. I don't know that we actually took fee for fee and looked at like gym space in each of them.
Right.
You know, because primarily our, you know, the thing is too is probably 80% of our gym space is used locally. So, you know, that's a smaller segment that's using it outside of there. You know, it's a potential. The other thing is that, and what I kind of learned in this process is that gym space is universally at a shortage. And so, you know, it's more or less, if you need the gym space to serve the students, you got to figure out a way to pay for it. And so like say, when they're coming to our district, it's not about our fees, it's about they need the space.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We will move on to the next agenda item, and that is payable 2016 school tax levy hearing, and Ms. Jane Huska.
Madam Chair, Board Members, Superintendent Haugen, members of the community, thanks for having me here tonight. I get my annual duty to discuss the taxes that the district is proposing for our community members and for our 16-17 school year. As part of state law, we are required to explain to our community members our taxes. So we need to be looking at our budget and how it compared to prior years. We need to be looking at our proposed property taxes and compare that to our prior year, and what the increases and decreases are, and to allow for public comment. Our agenda will follow just that. And so we're just gonna hop right in here and talk about our funding. As many of you know, all school districts in the state of Minnesota are very reliant on the state for funding. They set our formulas, they set the law, they set what we can and can't do. And one of those big formulas for all school districts is our basic gen ed formula. Since 2003, our gen ed formula, unfortunately, has not kept up with inflation. We are very thankful for what the legislature did for us this current year and next year by giving us 2%. But even with that, since 2003, we are still behind 10.3%. As we look at the graph, it will show the gap for each year as we move along. FY17, you can see that the difference is roughly $626. The red line would be if our basic gen ed formula kept up with inflation. The dashed line is the funding that we actually receive. And if we simply take the $626 and multiply that by 7,000 students, that's $4.3 million that we would receive in extra funding if our formula kept up with inflation. And just to let you know, that's more than we asked for in November. So in basic, we wouldn't have had to gone out for an election in November. One thing to keep in mind as we talk about our tax cycle is that the city and county is on a different cycle than we are. They follow on a calendar year, which is January to December, and as a school district, we follow a fiscal year, which is July to June. So when I talk payable 16, that's for the 16-17 school year. So the first thing that we'll take a look at here is look at our FY15 budget and how it compares to FY16. It's pretty straightforward. We begin on the left side with our fund balances for FY15. We put in our revenues and expenditures and come out with our ending balance for June 30th, 2015. Then the next two columns are our adopted budget that the board approved in June. And then all the way on the right will be our projected fund balance as of June 30, 2016. We will be taking a closer look at those fund balances here in the first part of 2016 as we look at amending our budget. Graphically, to look at all of the revenue that the district brings in, our general fund is 72.1% of all revenue that we bring in, followed up by our debt service, then community ed, and food service. If we specifically just look at our general fund revenue, 89.5% of all revenue brought into the district come from some sort of state resources. Again, that just reiterates how dependent school districts are on state funding and state formulas, the legislature, all of the above. Followed up by property taxes and federal sources. If we flip the coin over and look at our expenditures by program, and we take a look at regular instruction, vocation, special ed, instructional support, and pupil support, all of those areas that touch our classroom, that makes up 80% of our expenditures. So we're spending our dollars in our classrooms where we should be. If we were to break it down by our object code, and if you add salaries and wages to our employee benefits, it equals 80%. So like we've talked about in the past, 80% of our budget goes towards personnel. And so when we have to make budget realignments or make decisions, 9 times out of 10, or 8 times out of 10, it affects somebody in our district. As we move forward, we'll be looking at our property taxes. We'll see how that is determined, how it compares to last year, and what was the change from the prior year. So every taxable property that somebody owns within our districts can have different taxing jurisdictions. And so that's one thing I want people to understand. We're talking tonight about our school district taxes and what we are able to. But you also can have county, city, you can have township, or even special districts. Within just our school district taxes, we roughly have 30 different levies that we can opt for. With each taxing jurisdictions, the limits are set by state law. The county collects the taxes that are approved by each jurisdiction and then redistributes the funds back out to them. Just a little schedule of how we ended up to where we are tonight. Over the summer, as a school district, we fill out our summer tax levy. The state MDE then takes that information and puts a preliminary tax levy together on September 8th. On September 28th, the board decided just to levy the max, because at that time, they were still even going through calculations. As I brought that information forward, there was stuff that wasn't even finalized for our own district. Mid-November, the county mailed out proposed property tax statements to all property owners within our community, which brings us here tonight to December 14th to have our public hearing on our taxes. So, I'm going to stay on the screen. I'll be talking about all the supporting documentation behind it, but I think it's relative so you can understand the numbers as they go across instead of just flipping through the screen. So Just bear with me. Overall, our increase is 22.1%, or $4.3 million. There are three main reasons that our taxes are going up. One, our operating levy, which passed in November. Two, our building bond, which passed in November. And three, our change in enrollment. There were some minor changes that happened in the legislation between aid and levy, but nothing like that we've had in prior years. Those are the three main reasons we are seeing the big changes in our levy for FY16. So we'll just go down and talk about the major components, and please feel free to ask any questions along the way. So the first two we're going to talk together, board-approved referendum and voter-approved referendum. If you remember, before we went out for the election in November, we asked the board to rescind their board-approved $300 authority, which you did, and so that's why you're seeing that for payable 16, that dollar amount is zero. And then, thankfully for all of the community, we are very appreciative, they passed our operating levy in November, and that's why you're going to see the big increase there of $2.8 million. As we move down, the local optional levy, we're seeing an increase of $187,000, and that basically has to do with our change in enrollment that we're having in our district. As we keep on moving down, the next area that I'd like to talk about, which we have, as a board, have talked quite a bit about, is the items in the box: health and safety, deferred maintenance, and long-term facility maintenance. As you remember, in 2015, the legislature passed this long-term facilities maintenance, which was to put in place and to take over the old health and safety plan, the deferred maintenance, and the alt comp plan, which we weren't allowed to be in because you had to be the 25 largest districts. So they put this funding mechanism in place to make it a fair funding stream for all districts in the state of Minnesota. So that's why you see the little ins and outs on those programs there. As we move down, I'd like to talk about the levy adjustments. Again, I will own up to that error that I talked about earlier. It was the OPEB and how it was funding. You have to pay for it up front and get the funding the next year, so I put it on 1 year too early, and that's why you see the big negative adjustment there. As we move down through the community service fund, you can see there's really not any major adjustments or increases or decreases. Community ed is based on two factors. They're based on our population, or it's based on actual expenditures. So they don't have huge fluctuations unless our population goes out of control, or we just have a huge boom in an expenditure, or we drop a program or something like that. So that stays pretty consistent. As we move on down to the debt service fund, you're going to see an increase of 1.9 in the voter approved. Again, that will be where you're going to see our building bond that was approved in November. You're going to see the first year payment there, and also you're seeing the increase because of the way that our debt is structured. If you remember, our debt is structured to be end loaded. And what that means is, as we are a growing community, we didn't want to equalize those payments out over the next 10, 15, 20 years, depending upon the bond. We knew we were growing, so as the community grew, we wanted our payments to grow, so it evened out the playing field. The other debt service, what you're seeing there is our alternative facility bonds that we had in place to clean up some health and safety issues at FES. You're seeing a negative there because that is also part of the long-term facility maintenance revenue. So that actually hops up above, and so that's why you're seeing the negative there. Other post-employee benefits, that's actually our bond payments on the bonds that we issued in 2006 for OPEB, $6 million, and so that's just, you're seeing an increase because we haven't increased in our bond payment for there. So overall, again, we're seeing a 22.1% increase, $4.3 million. Basically comes down to three major areas: our operating levy, our building bond, and our change in enrollment. Now I'm just going to shuffle through. These are all things that I already talked about. Where I want to get to next is the impact on taxpayers, and we'll talk about that. So I do have a chart coming up here, but please keep in mind that these are just estimates. We did the best that we could with the information that we had at the time, so there is a potential that they could change. All our examples are based on a 12.1 increase over the property value over the period, and again, these are just estimates and things could change. These numbers were put together for us by Ellers, our financial advisor. I know this is really, really small, but I'll do the best that I can to explain it. So the line item that I really would like you to pay attention to is actually the fourth line down. If you go to the middle of the graph, it's called, under the column, estimated market value for 2006 taxes. Now the closest value that we have when compared to what we were using for our referendum is $225,000. Right to the left of that, you're gonna see taxes payable for 2015 were $1,310. If you move to the right, if the questions did not pass, that same house would have been paying $1,395, which would have been an increase of $85 or $7 a month. Since those two questions did pass, we are estimating that those two ballot questions are going to cost us $231. So for a total, for 2016, an increase of $284. And the next page is just a graphical representation, which is probably easier to read and understand. The yellow is what the property taxes were without the bond question, and the blue is with those bond questions passing. So that was the additional dollars that were added on top of our tax value, our taxes already. So our next step is to take public comment.
Are there any questions for Ms. Huska? All right, thank you. We will move on to the final reports and communications item, which is committee assignments. We do this annually. It's just kind of a public service notice. I will be sending out requests for basically your standard form. Just a reminder, there is one additional committee on this year. We added our Tiger Fan Club group. And just as far as typically, it's something that the board chair then would make those committee assignments at the first organizational meeting in January. The process that I just wanted to share with you tonight is that I will be looking to put together the spreadsheet, and that information would be, not necessarily the committee assignments, but the information gathered would be shared with the rest of the board prior to the meeting. Any questions regarding that? All right, we will move on to administrative action.
I'll make a motion to acknowledge
thank you.
receipt of reports and communications.
Second.
I have a motion by Lee, a second by Cordes. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on to administrative action. And our first item are approval of Farmington High School course changes and Mr. Jason Berg.
This will be pretty short and sweet. We just have one course that we're proposing adding this year. Be Your Own Tech Support. And it's really kind of the back end of the technology piece. So one of our instructors has kind of noticed the need with the students that he works with that really of trying to get inside the guts of the computer, seeing how it works, and really on the other end of things being able to kind of solve your own problems. So that's kind of the gist of the class, really figuring out how the insides of those work, taking them apart, putting them back together, understanding the differences between Apple, Windows, Chromebooks, you know, what makes those different from the inside part, not just the, you know, the operating systems, but what are the pieces in there that are different, and then looking at differences between tablets and phones and all those different things. So more of an IT type of thing, not the running of the programs, but the nuts and bolts hardware of those technology pieces. So that's the one class that we would propose to add for next year. We have a couple others in the works for the following year, but that's it. We did talk at IPR about potentially adding a college level algebra class through Inver Hills. I met with them last week, and in order to do that, our students would have to take the AccuPlacer, and I'm such a big fan of standardized testing that we're not going to have another test that we have to give students to take in a class, so we're going to kind of do some other things with that as well. So we're just proposing this one class.
Are there any questions? Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
With that, I will take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the secondary course change for Farmington High School for the 16-17 school year as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Cordis, a second by Beam. Roll call?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, motion passes. So now we will have our second item, which kind of tags to our reports and communications. It's the authorization for school district levy 2015 payable 16. And Ms. Jane Huska.
Madam Chair, school board members, Mr. Superintendent Haugen, I'm here again to ask for the approval of the 2016 payable taxes.
Are there any questions this round? Otherwise, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to certify the property tax levy payable 2016 in the amount of $23,775,237 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Beam, a second by Lee. Roll call?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, motion passes. Thank you. Our final administrative action is the approval of the board self-evaluation tool. And with this many people in the audience, can I solicit the help of the superintendent, since you have the connection? We have documents that are attached to the board packet, and then that way, as we talk through the process quickly, people can see what I'm referencing. So the school board met in a board retreat earlier this fall, and the goal for that retreat was to potentially develop a self-assessment process for the board. We have gone through, since I've been on the board, a number of self-assessments. This is something that's recommended by NSBA, MSBA, just as a good measure to, we get our feedback through different venues, community surveys and whatnot, but also to do a self-evaluation. In going through, we went and line by line went through questions on it, and there's two aspects for it. So the one that the superintendent has up right now is the full board evaluation, and so board members would be expected to go through and answer questions, and this gives it basically a numeric value that is plugged in later. So a number of questions gone through just regarding different aspects of board activities. And then a second tool that is on there is our individual board member. And this is one where individual board members can then provide feedback on other board members, or will, more so, we're receiving feedback individually from the rest of the board. And so this is, so one is board-based and the other one is individual board member-based. With this, it is a new process. MSBA facilitates board evaluations and whatnot. They have, they will gather feedback and whatnot from individual board members. They don't necessarily provide 360s, but they facilitate individual feedback to board members through the process that they facilitate. This would be similar but not the same, but it would basically give individual feedback to board members. And so then we'll go to the final two documents, which because we are a public entity and whatnot, did some homework with MSBA and state administration. And what exactly do we utilize in public meetings? What can individuals get individually? So this first one here is a spreadsheet that basically board members, the process would be we would fill out the tools and then hand deliver the hard copies in and have them summarized by a single member, not board member, but a designated district member. As you can see, the members are listed but not named, and so those individual, it's private essentially. And so the individual data that's accumulated from the individual summaries, surveys, then gets put into a summary document. And so this is the one for the full board evaluation. So it breaks out the individual ones, and then if you scroll down to the next field, it will show you that it will calculate the summary totals. And so in doing this, it's giving you a data-driven tool to identify where our opportunities are, so that as our next step in developing action plans, the goal is that we as a group can look at where do we have our greatest opportunities to focus our efforts. The final document that I have is that was the individual summary, and then here's the whole board. And so again, very similar process. So in doing this, if the board chooses, we can all get our individual feedback individually. And so those summaries would get pulled together. They would be printed hard copy and hand delivered to individual members. We would not discuss them as a group, our individual ones, therefore not being public documents, but we would be given that opportunity to receive feedback, and that the summaries would be the only thing that we would maintain it as a public document in our board minutes, as we would for our normal retention, public retention document process. Just a couple other things that I have sent out from information to the board. We had talked through this process in the board retreat, and the process, I had done some just review, and as I shared, had homework with MSBA and state administration. As far as the timeline, that's something that we had determined at the time at the December meeting. We were going to outline, yes, is this the process that we're comfortable with, what timeline, and then what are our next steps. I sent out earlier today a couple of recommendations. I would recommend that the final documents are sent out to board members by the end of this month, and it would give you the entire month of January to complete those documents and return them in by the end of January. I would suggest that at the first meeting in January, the board puts an agenda item on and determines the date for the February retreat. And would really recommend probably mid-February for that, so that there would be ample time to just get those documents into the summaries and available then for the board retreat. I would recommend that the board retreat in February then would be focused on the self-evaluation tool, looking through where our opportunities are. And at that point, this is the biggest piece I feel like is, as a board, the examples that I'd sent out from previous ones, we've gone through this, not this particular board, but the Farmington School Board has gone through self-evaluation a number of times, set goals, but never set action plans. And so that would be my recommendation for the February retreat, is that time is spent on this reflecting, but a greater amount of that time is obviously identifying those areas of opportunity, but defining what our action plan would be moving forward, and then how do we proceed from that.
I have a question.
Sure.
So that retreat in February, would we have a facilitator to help us create action plans from our feedback? Or would that be something we would be doing just as a group?
That can be a decision of the board. So we could reach out and get a facilitator. You know, if people have been comfortable with how the board retreats have been currently being facilitated, depending on how we reorganize as well. I mean, I'm happy to help provide some of those processes and do homework and work with others to get feedback. So I'm open for both, whatever the board is most comfortable with.
Well, the reason that I ask is because the issue that the board had with the last board evaluation was that we never did anything with the feedback, and so I love the idea of having the action plans. I think that was a piece that was missing from the last time we did this, and so I just want to make sure that we have that focus and that we are able to write action plans that are board level appropriate, that we can actually fulfill and are realistic for us. Mm-hmm. And so if we feel that we can do that, that'd be great, but if we feel like we might need a facilitator to help us, then I think that's something we should discuss as well.
Any other questions or comments?
I guess I would recommend that we probably try it on our own with the district resources.
Yeah.
And if we come and we find that we're at distinct odds, you know, or that we can't settle on it, or we're not being able to kind of get to a good action plan, then I would say that we could bring somebody in. But I think, you know, we can have the school administration can, I think, help us through it at a retreat probably.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
in regards to this being an evaluation discussion, I think it would be very helpful to have an outside facilitator.
Is your mic on?
I don't know. Hello, is this on? Discussing the fact of doing a self-evaluation or group evaluation, I think it would be helpful to have an outside facilitator come in just to have that outside perspective.
Board Member Cordes or Carrero?
I guess I'm used to at work doing a self-contained, like we'd use our own staff, our own leadership on that, like the administration here, instead of paying somebody outside to come in and do the evaluation. So I'd be in favor of having, you know, Barb or whomever we choose to assist us on that.
I would agree. I think, for lack of a better term, free help is better than paid help.
Okay, so then we do pay dues to MSBA. So here's my question to you, because they, a number of people were very instrumental. I can't tell you how many times I called them and spent a number of time on the phone with them. If the board is comfortable, I would like to be able to share. I mean, they were very interested in our process, would like to hear, and you know, wanted to see how the process went. So if you guys are comfortable with that, you know, after we meet in February, if that's the way we go, regardless of the outcome, share that with MSBA and see if they have some recommendations or feedback that we can provide, and not necessarily they're facilitating. And if we choose, I would recommend then that we'd look at MSBA potentially, or I do know that Superintendent Haugen has also indicated that there are other groups within the Twin Cities area that are facilitators that we potentially could contract services with if we choose to go down that route. So what I'm hearing from the board is that our process will be then to utilize the documents as presented tonight. We will, for a timeline, get the documents out to all the board members by the end of December, have them turned in for the summarization process by the end of January, and at our organizational meeting in January, we will define the date for our February retreat. I would encourage all of you, as you fill them out and look at what opportunities you see, is start writing down potentially things that you think would be good opportunities for this board, so that we have some good discussion for action plans, essentially.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I still have a few couple questions before we get to that point.
Oh, sure.
Can you please explain the process of how we're going to do the evaluations in terms of, there was discussion of turning them out individually, anonymously or something. Can you go through that process for me, please?
So as we discussed at our board retreat, that in order to keep the data as private as possible, working with a public entity, that we were not going to email electronically, which could be subject to Freedom of Information Act requests. And so the process basically would be that we would hard copy, electronically send the documents to the board members, print them out, complete them. Those hard copies would then get turned in. That information would be immediately put into the summary documents and then discarded. So the individual forms would not be public data, essentially. They would be just utilized to turn in physically, essentially. That process would be to put it in the spreadsheets as shared tonight, and then those documents would not be kept. And then as defined, we would then take those summary documents. I would expect that the individual tabs as seen in there, if the board is wanting to follow that process and get the individual feedback, that as our recorder, they would know which member was. Those documents, that tab of the spreadsheet would get hard copy printed, and delivered to the individual board members at the February retreat. So we would not get them electronically, we would just get a hard copy of the individual feedback. This was recommended by MSBA because it is a similar process to what they follow when they facilitate individual feedback. They don't present it to the entire board, they present it individually to those individual members so that it's not necessarily considered a public document.
My concern is, and I know that we went back and forth, and I appreciate your time this week, as well as the state MSBA. My concern is that as public entities, that concerning the Official Records Act of the state, and I didn't realize that as a school board we could declare certain documents of our board to not be public. And if we're going through a process where we need to destroy something, I think it's a gray area, and I'm concerned with that part.
Well, you know, and to your point, Member Sasser, we aren't necessarily destroying documents that shouldn't be public. According to what we follow, which is public retention policy, is that if it is not defined as a public retention document, we have no obligation to keep those documents. And so the difference is that, you know, email correspondences and whatnot can be requested, and that's why we were following this process, was that in trying to be sensitive to individual feedback in a public setting was to do it. And so this is, none of the data is being destroyed in the sense that it is being placed in a summary document. People will actually have access to the information that we have, it's just not defining who it belongs to, so to speak. And so, and really that's, the purpose of something like this is not to, it's to define where our areas of opportunity and focus on what our action plans would be to improve as a board. And so feedback is an opportunity to get perceptions, and as we've discussed on a number of times, perceptions to people are their realities, and sometimes it is good to get feedback on what that perception is, and so we have the tools to, so.
Madam Chair, in terms of these action plans, would they be individually board member centric, or would it be group centric as a board?
That would be the decision of this board. I think it's a we would essentially utilize the feedback and develop those action plans. Each of us will receive our own individual feedback. I personally will take that feedback and more than likely develop my own individual action plan based on that feedback to say, this is what, these are where my areas of opportunity are, and that may focus what questions I ask when we start talking about the individual summary to say, where do we have opportunities, and maybe make recommendations based on, well, I received this feedback. I might recommend to the entire board that I'm going to work on this year. Is everybody comfortable with this action? So that's the intent. Is so I personally would not have the expectation that I would turn in my own self-performance improvement plan to the entire board. I think that my expectation, and I don't know anybody else can speak to this, is that we take that we receive that feedback and develop our own self-action that we can bring to the discussion to say, how do we work together as a team or as a board to improve the work that we do.
Madam Chair, I agree. I think your best assessment is from your peers. And that will turn in probably to more of an assessment of what we can improve on as a group on that. I mean, I don't mind, I understand, I think where Board Member Saucer is going, there's may be some things that you don't want to put on your self-assessment for everybody to see, but you may have some where you're going to say, you know, Board Member Cordes, help me improve on this skill. To me, I'm fine with being transparent on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that sounds like an excellent process moving forward as a group and setting goals for ourselves as individuals.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would agree as well. Just one question on the board activity, on the board level review, are we going to see it, just the summary of the scores, or are they going to show it by member to us?
It's by member with the summary. So each one of the summaries has the column of individual responses, just named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. And then the spreadsheet that I actually have calculates the average. So we will have the summary plus the average of each of the activities.
I'm just wondering if we're not going to get more hung up on, oh, well, this person ranked this high, but this high, rather than on that board one, if we just buy in that we value everybody's opinion and just go with the average on the board rather than seeing the individual. Just a thought.
That's a good point.
So the board level one, to take out the individual responses on the board level one entirely and just do,
Just show the average so that we're focused on what the average is and not how we got to the average.
okay?
But if we have 5 board members, circle of 5 and 1 circle of 1, I think it's important to know that there's one person in our group that's
Right.
not seeing things the same as everyone else, or if we're all sort of averaged and close to each other.
Well, and I think
So we're looking for themes, things that stand out, common patterns, and
like I say, but I wouldn't want to discount that person's opinion either, by saying, well, everybody else thinks it's fine, and I think if we focus on the averages, then we're not getting down to you'll be able to see that, okay, these are the things that we need to work on based on the average scores. Like I say, and I'd hate for us with this small pool to start to kind of pick apart numbers.
You don't want it to turn into a workshop.
Well,
Who scored
there
so
could be
much?
that, or there could be, like I say, some people score higher and so you just miss because only one person scored lower. It's still an opportunity because somebody feels that way. So I think if we truly value the opinions of the other board members, we could go with just the average. And then that way we're focused on the action plan, the go forward, rather than how did we get to that number. Just a thought. I'm fine either way with it,
and
really.
if we
but-
have the other piece in place with the individual assessment,
Right.
then that will come out there.
And that's all stuff that's more,
Right.
personal, so.
And that can be part of the action plan piece also, is that if everything averages out to 3.4, we can say maybe we need to look at if there are some things that have spreads versus. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the summary tool for the board activities will only provide the summary data. Is that what everybody's comfortable with?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I still have a few concerns.
Sure.
I want to say, first of all, I'm in full favor of our group assessment, but I'm still having issues with the 360 assessment. I understand the comment you said earlier about that if we were to do a retreat with the School Boards Association, that there would be an individual piece to it, and our retreats are public. This area of discarding the data makes me wary, and I understand that it would still be anonymously of sorts, but with such a small group, it's hard to have 5 people be anonymous. Not saying that I don't trust the district, but I think it's a piece where we need to be as transparent as possible. And I also think that the community also is welcome to reviews on us. And I think that they're the ones that put us here at the table, and I think they should be able to have input as well with that piece. I definitely believe we need to work on assessment and work on goals, but I don't think we need to be doing it nitpicking each other with a 360 approach. And I'm concerned, while there's varying opinions on whether it's okay or not to destroy the valuations, I'm concerned that it could be opening us up for a legal challenge, and that's the last thing I think we want. So,
Madam Chair, didn't you do, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
So, I lost my train of thought now. The piece there is I think we just need to be concerned and careful, and I think since this is a new process, since we are aware that there really aren't any other boards that have done this 360 process, I think we need to be cautious with what we're jumping into.
So Madam Chair, doesn't MSBA do something similar with the 360 feedback process?
It's similar. They do more of kind of meeting with individual board members, getting, depending on what the board is asking for that feedback, they can provide individual feedback to board members. So in how they provide that, they haven't utilized a tool exactly like this. This is new.
Right.
But
I think,
Madam Chair,
in the working world, this has become very commonplace to do 360 feedback, and it's anonymous, and it's, it's more of a developmental tool for, how you come across, like you say, the perception is reality, that people give that feedback to make you a better person and a better, teammate, to work through projects and things like that. And I think it would be valuable to see that, and to, you know, I think it's good for all of us, and it's private. And I think you also checked with the State Board of Records, right, on, and they said that this was fine to say this wasn't an official record. And, you know, like I say,
And Madam Chair, also, I would have to say that I have an issue with using the term nitpicking, because I feel like we are a team up here, and and I welcome feedback from my team members. The community put me here, but you are who have to work with me in an intimate level and see how I'm actually doing my job in a closer level than the community will ever see. And we send out community surveys and we get that community feedback, and I think that's fabulous. But
and
I
they
feel
vote at
like
and they can vote us out.
they can vote us out. That's the ultimate survey. And so I think that, I mean, I am anxious to see what my fellow board members think about me. I'm perfectly comfortable with making that completely public if we have a problem destroying information. But I feel like that the purpose is not to nitpick at each other and to get each other, but to say, how can we be better?
Right.
What can we do? What's our vision? What are our goals? And what are we doing as individuals that may be hindering those goals that we don't necessarily notice because it's just the way we do business, and having a candid conversation and supporting each other and helping each other. That's the way I want to talk about this, not anything to do with nitpicking, because that's not the intent.
The only people out there who can make us better board members are sitting up here, because we all know what we go through. And community surveys and elections are the ultimate feedback tool. But if we want to become better public servants, we're the only people.
Or a higher performing board.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
What I'd like to propose in light of this discussion is that we do the group assessment tool, evaluate the board as a whole, and we use the 360 page as a self-assessment that we do upon our own reflection, and then come back as a group and discuss that, and take a step in this process.
So are you making that motion then?
Yes.
I just have one question. I guess as a new board member, I look at you guys to give me feedback so I can improve. I mean, I hear from the public and I take that and take it for heart to make changes, but I want to hear from you guys personally, if it's not face-to-face, and many of us do have those candid conversations of how I can improve. The 360 communication to me is critical. I mean, we do that at work day in and day out, and I will tell you the first time I ever have done that, it's uncomforting, you know, but you do get used to it. And you know your peers you work with. It's not nitpicking, it's factual information. A lot of times it's good examples where you say, oh, I didn't realize that. Or my body language, I didn't know that, you know, I have a habit of doing this and I look disgruntled or something. It's nice to hear that from my peers.
So back to board member Sassar. So would you like to clarify your motion then?
I'd like to make the motion that we do the group evaluation as a whole, and we consider the 360 evaluation piece at this time as a self-evaluation tool that we'll bring back and discuss at a retreat in February.
A motion on the table. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Do I have a second? All right, hearing none. Are there any other questions before we go to our final motion? All right, then hearing none, I will make a motion. Ooh, sorry, I'm on a different page. I will make a motion to approve the board self-assessment process as discussed this evening, including timeline, and retain the summary document as a matter of record.
Second.
Thank you. Superintendent Haugen, will you assist with this last vote? So I have a motion by Singwald, a second by Lee. Roll call.
Okay, roll call. We'll start Carrara,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Cordes,
Yes.
Sasser,
No.
Beam,
Yes.
Sigmund.
Yes, motion passes. All right, that completes our administrative action. And our final, or not our final, final item on our agenda is policy action, and this is a final reading of policy 902, use of school facilities and equipment, and this is third round. Are there any questions or comments this final time? Hearing none, I will take a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt policy 902, use of school facilities and equipment, as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Carrero, a second by Lee. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, final item on our agenda are board remarks, and I will swing over to our esteemed school board members and see if you have any last comments outside of your student update. Perfect. Board member Carrero?
I will. Just want to wish everybody happy holidays. Also, all the best to Mr. Januska on his retirement. And again, Ms. Davenport spoke on the winter sports. All the winter sports are off to a great start this year, boys and girls, so continued success on that.
Board member Lee?
I absolutely want to thank and recognize Ben Januska. I'm very sad to see him go. I have admired Mr. Januska for a variety of things over the years. I admire the way he stands as a guard for his teachers and shields them so that they can do what they need to do to see that every student succeeds. He is their shield from disgruntled parents, from just a whole variety of things. I've just seen him stand in the gap for teachers over the years, and I really appreciate that about him. I appreciate the way he's always been there for my sons and bonded with my youngest, and he's always been fair, and he investigates. He's been a calming presence, as Superintendent Haugen mentioned, and he always has wisdom. There is no way that I would be where I am today at the board table or in my educational career without Ben Januska, and I'm going to miss him a lot, and I'm going to stop right now.
Board member Beebe?
Yes, I'd also like to congratulate Ben on his retirement and appreciate his service. And, you know, I've really valued his opinion over the years. And you know, even going back from before I was on board, I got to know Ben. And really, like I say, he's somebody that I've always felt like I could get an honest opinion from and appreciated his feedback. And so, like I say, I will miss him too. And also I want to thank Jane for all her work on this facility project. You know, one of the things that we went from kind of putting numbers on a sheet and not really understanding what they were doing to the budget. And when I asked if we could, you know, get those numbers on there and the system isn't really friendly, and Jane had to put a lot of effort into getting us those numbers, and appreciate the work that she did. And then we got to a point where the numbers weren't really making sense, and we kind of said, do you think you can make sense of the numbers? And she did, and so appreciate all her analysis on that to get that to a state where we could really look at it and make sense of it. So thank you.
Board member Salzer?
I just wanted to report back about the MSB Delegate Assembly that was a couple weeks ago, and it was really exciting to come together with other board members that are passionate about changing legislation for the better for our kids. And I wanted to report back that I was thrilled that 2 of the 3 resolutions that we brought forward did pass through the Delegate Assembly. The first one was providing general education disparity aid, which, if you remember, that was the one to help other districts that are lower funded to get more funding. So that was cool. And the other one that went through was allowing more flexibility within the innovation zone, specifically to some of the concerns we've had in our district. And it was great to hear other school board members jump up and express how they were thrilled with those kind of issues, especially when I talked about seat time. It didn't go through, but many board members did step up and say how they think flexibility is important and how it's not about hours of learning and that we should be more flexible. So moving forward next year, I have a few ideas of maybe how we can tweak it, maybe write it a little bit better, maybe work with some of the other boards as well, because out of the woodwork, people just came up in support of it without any cajoling beforehand, so it was great to see that. The other piece is last week I was able to attend the gingerbread showcase that the food industry career students from 917 do. And it was just neat to see the gingerbread houses every year and the little work and details they did, as well as the houses that the teachers prepared as well. So thank you.
Board member Portis?
I would like to reiterate some of the comments made tonight. First, thank you to Ben Januska basketball with this old man. And at the time, I had Peggy Januszka as a teacher, and I go and I said, yeah, my brother called your husband an old man. And she thought that was funny, and Ben thought that was funny. So again, I want to thank him for his service. And like Superintendent Haugen said, this is our last meeting here. This DS is now as well. But I'm excited to move to City Hall and take over there.
I don't think, all I'm going to do is echo the comments. I don't think I can add any more. He was the principal at FES with two of my kids before the boundaries changed, and I ended up at Riverview with my final one. So enjoyed spending a number of years working with him, both as a parent in the building and also as a board member. The one last thing I'd like to mention is a great big thank you to the community members who came out and volunteered to participate in the career fair that was held at the middle schools. It was, I will say I participated also in the healthcare division and got to give examples of how to draw blood. And so for those kids who weren't squeamish, it was very exciting to talk about laboratory science and the patient care side of things. So, but it was extremely exciting to be wedged between Buffalo Wild Wings and an investment banker because it was a very broad spectrum of community members, and to watch these young adults, because that's really what they are, come in and be prepared and ask really good questions. Some of it was about the swag, but there was a lot of kids that came and had very good questions and would go, ooh, that's not for me, or tell me more. And to see that level of excitement in our youth, I think all of us were greatly exhausted when the 2.5 hours was up, and totally appreciate middle school teachers that much more today. But thank you for the opportunity for us to come and touch the students' lives, as well as those community members that volunteer their time and efforts to share their sparks with our future leaders within our community. So everybody have a wonderful holiday season, be safe, and I look forward to our organizational meeting in January. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:09.
Second.
I have a motion by Cordes, a second by Lee. All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned.